Well, will the president of this show someday replace O? National Review reports that Red Eye president and former ambassador to the UN, John Bolton, is being encouraged by GOP leaders to consider a 2016 White House bid. That got us thinking, what would a Bolton presidency look like? Would he let me sleep over in the Oval Office? Would he cancel all other shows except Red Eye? Would mustaches be mandatory for men over 18? Let's ask him about all of this very important stuff. Ambassador, thank you for coming. I appreciate you being here. Unlike Mercurio, who's a sympathy booking, we enjoy having you here. And I do warn Paul not to interrupt him.
Are you really going to run for president? Sorry.
I told him to heckle from the gallery, so it's already started.
First off, mustaches mandatory?
I wouldn't make anything mandatory. That's part of my platform.
Well, that's good. I like that already. How about tax breaks for mutton chops?
I think taxes ought to be as low as we can make them and as flat as we can make them. So no tax breaks for facial hair.
Well, that's a good question. Now that we're we're into this IRS mess. Are you for fair or flat tax? Because I'm confused.
Well, a flat tax is premised on the idea that the only purpose of taxation is to raise money to run the government. And if we had that kind of guiding principle, a lot of the distortions that we see would be taken out of the market and the IRS would be a lot smaller.
How about a fair tax?
I don't know what a fair tax is. I think a flat tax is as fair as you can get. Everybody pays the same percentage.
All right. I get confused. Everybody says, no, fair tax, no, flat tax, no, fair. I think isn't fair basically, I think, a sales tax, I think, is what...
Well, if you could switch from an income-based tax system to a sales-based tax system, that would be better. But the way Congress works, you'd end up with both.
Yeah, that is true.
So forget that.
Never met a tax they didn't like. What will you need to convince you to run?
Well, what I'm really interested in is making sure that national security is at the top of the political agenda. I think we've gone for 4.5 years without discussing it, and that's got to change. We face threats around the world. We've seen them. We've talked about them some in the show tonight. And I think the American people actually expect their president to defend them.
Yeah. What do you think of the, what would you do in terms of changing the foreign policy with people like Syria and Iran, North Korea,
Well,
Canada?
I think you've got to take these threats seriously, and the idea that underlies Obama's policy, which is you can negotiate with all of these people, just leaves us in greater danger. Right now, we've got a lack of respect around the world that this president campaigned against, pointing to the Bush administration. Now we can't get Edward Snowden back from China, from Russia. Pretty soon we won't be able to get him back from Ecuador. That's a pretty serious problem.
Would you abolish the UN?
No, Jean Kirkpatrick was once asked if the U.S. should withdraw from the UN, and she thought about it for a minute and said, no, it's not worth the trouble.
Yeah, it really is. It's kind of like, when you got a really ugly, grotesque tree in your yard, but you realize if you try to remove it, it's going to leave a big, weird hole for years. So you just leave the stupid tree there. Sorry, tree. I hope he's not watching. Who would be your running...
This is not necessarily my environmental policy that you've just described. Just for...
What is your environmental policy?
I don't really have much of an environmental policy at this point, but I know it. I know that the president's determination to put his climate change policies in effect without legislation through the APA is a power grab that's very dangerous.
One more question. Who would be your running mate, and does his or her name rhyme with Schmeg Schmutfeld?
Not that I know of, and I haven't gotten that far in my thinking, but I'd solicit ideas from the American people. That's how you run. You're not supposed to have ideas yourself.
Yeah.
You're just offering. You're offering. Yeah, hey, here, we got one right here.
Oh, as VP? Yeah.
Well, we've already had a first black president, maybe the first sequential hermaphrodite VP. I would build a lot of roads.
You would build a lot. You would build a lot of bridges between confused sexualities.
And I would have parties on those bridges with other SHs.
If you run,
I got completely lost in this conversation.
I'm able to change gender.
Come on,
just by thinking about it.
You know what happens where you live, sir. Come on.
All right. Well, that started promising.
and went straight downhill.
I tried to make it serious and thoughtful.
If you do run, I would never advise you to be interviewed by him again.
Well, they told me you were going to ask me if I left the presidency of Red Eye, who would succeed me, and I didn't get to give my answer.
Oh, who?
I have this office for life. Didn't they tell you?
You're going to hold 2 offices at the same time. All right. Well, I'm for that as well. But we got to move on now.